Hi, everyone, and welcome to People, Nature, and Big Ideas. My name is Rhonda Lee Chapman, and I'm the Equity Director at the Trust for Public Land. And I'm also a lover of the outdoors. I'm an advocate for the outside. I'm definitely an advocate for Black women. And I'm a daughter, and I'm a sister. I'm an aunt, a niece, a dog mom. I'm a good friend. But this podcast isn't really about me. It's really intended to be a place where I get to dig in and talk with other people about the amazing intersection of people and nature and big ideas. So I'm really excited about this conversation today because we're going to talk about two things that are at the heart of the kind of work that I'm doing inside TPL and even beyond. So the first topic I want to talk about today is transformation. I'm thinking about how the outdoors and our experiences in nature actually transform us. I'm thinking about how we change as a people or as a community as a result of those experiences. I'm curious about how our identities can shift when we deepen or alter our relationship with nature. And even more, I'm thinking about how the interactions with the outdoors can really help create new relationships in our neighborhoods, or think about the way we can interact with our cities and our local governments. So that's the first topic I want to dig into today. And then the second topic is about the future of the conservation field. The conservation movement is still very much a white male dominated space. And so when we look at the origin of that movement, we see who holds the most power. And when we look at the folks holding the power, they are individuals who come from a place of privilege. And the way conservation work is often presented, it's usually through the lens of those people coming from privilege. And I think that TPL has been working really hard to flip that narrative. We've been doing that for some time, and I think we have a ways to go. And so we're seeing more folks of color get recognized for the different ways that they continue to step forward in their communities. And whether it's through designing and building a community park, which is what we'll talk about today, or like in our first episode with my friend Tyke James, shout out to Tyke, applying birding as a way to build connections between civil rights and the Black experience. I mean, there are all sorts of unique and exciting ways folks of color are bringing their unique perspectives, the way we bring our backgrounds with us to inform the future of conservation. So we're going to dig into that. So to help me talk through some of these ideas today, I'm really excited to bring on Jarisneka Rose and Chris Urias. They are two of TPL's core fellows. And at TPL, the core stands for Community Outreach with Resident Experts. They are talented, they're activists, they're community leaders, they're super fresh, they're people of color. And I really think that in their hearts and their spirits, and through the love that they have for the community, I think they really reflect the direction that conservation is and should be heading. So I hope that the folks who are listening, particularly those of you who might consider yourself a little bit younger, I hope you're thinking about the intersection of nature and the outdoors and how you can support your communities. I'm hoping that you'll listen to this conversation and see a little bit of yourself reflected in Jarisneka and in Chris. And maybe you also come away with some tips about how to show up, how to help out, and how to get involved. So let's go ahead and get started with my conversation with Jarisneka and Chris. Jarisneka, I'm going to start with you. You know, a little while ago, when I asked my colleague Emily, who's somebody that you know really well now, Emily was working as our lead at TPL for the Panorama Park project. And I asked her about you. I heard some rumors about this amazing person who was doing this great work. And she said something to me that I thought was really important. She said, you know, when you're in the community, you're always looking for the leaders who stand up and raise their voice. And she said that you were one of those folks who did that. She said that she was so excited to have your presence and your energy. And so first, I'd love to know what drew you to the Panorama Park project, and why did it resonate with you, and what made you want to get involved?
Yeah, so hi. Diving right in, Panorama Park Honestly, it was a situation where somebody that I knew and trusted, I was working on another project with, doing some programming because this is mid-pandemic or very early pandemic. I was doing some programming for children and getting outdoors called Pencils in the Park. Well, everyone, mainly kids with Catamount Institute and the Generation Wild Coalition. And she told me like, hey, there's these meetings going on about a new park or renovating a park and you should come. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, okay, another meeting where people want to tell us what to do and no, we're here to fix your neighborhood and you want this. So just show up and take what we give you. So in my mind, I wasn't that excited. And I'm pretty sure it was like at 6:30 or later in the evening. And I already had a long day and I really didn't want to go, from being 1,000% frank, but I went. And then I get in there and it's like Emily and some other people that I knew, and they're just talking. And I'm like, we're just talking, this is the you hear our opinions, but are you really going to make a difference? So really is what was in my mind. But what was different was Emily was asking questions and people would answer. And eventually, we got comfortable, especially because it's a lot of people I already knew that were there. So I started answering questions too, and everybody's talking and getting involved, and she's just taking notes and really listening. And I'm like, she didn't come in with a plan like, we are giving you this. You need a pickleball court because everybody in Colorado Springs like pickleball, and this is what you're going to get. So mind you, I don't know what pickleball is, but that's not the point. My community does not play pickleball, even though the greater Colorado Springs community may love pickleball. So I was just really enticed and like, oh, she seems cool. And then I came to the next meeting and it was all the suggestions we had about the master planning process and the things that the youth wanted and, the older people, everybody wanted, were incorporated into the new plan that she brought back. And I was like, oh, they're listening. Okay, cool. And of course, Panorama Park is in my neighborhood. I went to Panorama Middle School, which is directly behind Panorama Park. So anything of creating change and doing good things in the neighborhood, I definitely always am interested in and want to see my community continue to grow and thrive. It's just sometimes, there's that lack of trust within organizations or the city or whoever when you meet certain demographics or statistics like your quote underserved or highly dense minority population. There's just certain things that as a stigma that society has in their mind that's gonna fix you or you want is going to make you better, and that's not the case. Like every community, whether they are all in the same statistic or demographic, has different needs. And I think it was just really unique and genuine and organic that TPL came in and really just built this partnership where the community was at the forefront. They were at the table, their needs were heard, they were listened to. And through that, it also built a partnership with the city because TPL was really the bridge between the lack of trust that we had with like the city, whether that be Parks and Rec or any specific department, but the city at large, the city of Colorado Springs, the organization, not the actual city. And, the community, because we really didn't have like a relationship at all. Again, it's more of like, well, you need this, we're going to do this, we're going to open a new pantry in your area, we're going to give your school $10,000 more per kid, and that's that figured out. This was more of a organic, let's build a relationship while we impact the environment positively. So that's really what got me hooked on the Panorama Park project.
Well, I first of all appreciate the kind of low-key jab at pickleball because I've been really resistant myself. I'm sure it's a fantastic sport and I know countless people who love it, but it wasn't until a couple of days ago, true story, that I actually watched a little bit of a game. Yeah. That's how reluctant I've been about it. So I definitely resonate with you with that. But, I want to go back to one thing that you shared about the way the whole process took place. You were really clear that coming in with a hidden agenda and an idea that was just going to dictate to the community what it is that was going to happen is a usual practice that you did not experience with this. And I'm wondering, was it the process that moved you? Was it the way the community around you was responding that actually moved you to want to be interested in sticking with it? Like, what was it that actually hooked you and made you want to stay on board?
Yeah, I would say it was the genuine interactions within the process, right? So the process itself is probably not something that's new. You go to community, you get feedback, you make the change, you do the thing. It was more of the, I hear you, I come in listening, and I know I don't know what your community needs, so I'm going to trust you and your expertise. And not only that, but I care about what you care about. So for example, in the Southeast, we love to eat. So if you're having a meeting after work hours and you don't have food, people probably aren't going to come. So it's just something as simple as after the first couple meetings where I'm pretty sure Joyce from Rise made it very clear that, like, we need food, we need drink, we need, start with music. This is the vibe, this is how you get people excited and invited. Just as simple as Emily making sure like we had snacks and drinks at every meeting. Like that's something that's intentional, that's genuine because you care about the people. Maybe they haven't eaten that day, or maybe we did want a sandwich or a slice of pizza, or just catering to the wants and the needs of the community, but also the process, But again, the process isn't what was unique. It was really the culmination of the genuine care and concern and just really putting community at the forefront. It was more of like leveraging your resources as TPL or with the city to really amplify the voices of the community. That's really how I felt and what got me hooked for life.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. So Chris, you're here with us too. I'm really grateful that you've joined us. I kind of want to turn some attention over to you. We're talking about transformation as one of the subjects in this conversation. And I mean, I guess I should say from the start, I've had an opportunity to talk with both of you in the past. And so it's part of the reason why we were excited to have you join this conversation. First, I heard about you, and then I met you, and now we're here. And for you, Chris, I think your story of where you were as a teenager and how and when you decided to make some changes in your life is a really great story. And for me, it's really the story of transformation is tied to your work at Montbello. And I'm curious if you can talk to us about, young Chris or early Chris, teenage Chris, if you could walk us through what was going on and how you approached the changes in your life.
Oh man, teenager Chris. What a different time. I would describe it as like I tell people I was kind of a B, C student, kind of like in school academics. I was kind of rough, I would talk back, and I wasn't that good of a person in general, I think. And so I didn't have manners, and I didn't really see myself, I think respecting my environment, my place, my friends and family. And so I think I was in a rough stage in my life, and really all I really cared about was, I think I was really into just, music and skateboarding. And that's what I wanted to do. I kind of want to spend time with my friends and kind of do dumb things and just be outside. And so it wasn't really until in middle school that I just constantly get in trouble in school. And I think the change in my environment, in my home environment, it was really my parents kind of splitting up. And so I think that really made me change the way I see my life and my family and my home situation. And so I had two decisions. I had, either keep doing what I was doing and just, doing the negative and bringing this negativity in my life, or I could kind of change and kind of be a better person and get involved. And so I think really what happened was, with my family situation, I'm the youngest of three. And so my oldest brother's out of the house. My sister's about 3 years older than me. And when my mother moved out, my sister moved out with her. And so I think that at that point, I had to actively try to see my sister. And so I love my family. I love my sister. And so, part of that to see her in school and going to high school was to get involved, join after school clubs and just kind of change around what I was doing. And so kind of her influence really helped me be the person who I am today. So, whether it was going to drama class and doing a play, or doing a guitar club, or, doing community events and student council, I really turned it around. And so I think for me, it was just change of environment. And so through that, I was able to I changed my mentality into just saying yes. And so my community really helped me kind of show up and gave me that opportunity to kind of have a second chance to be a better person. And so really when the community asked me, and when I was, showing up to meetings and showing up to events, like, hey, Chris, we would love for you to speak on this, or we'd love for you to get involved in this. And so I think that's where it just kind of, snowballed into me being like an activist and just being a face for Montbello and folks. And so, and I just had fun. I mean, really, I just wanted to have fun. I mean, that's at the end of the day, I just want to be outside. I want to do things. I want to learn things. And so with the combination of getting involved in my community, I did better in school. I was becoming like a B and A student. So, my grades are getting better. I didn't think about college till like sophomore, junior year. And so I think really just having these organizations in my neighborhood, that saw me as, as potential, and, where I wasn't just this knucklehead that was skateboarding and getting into bad things and hanging around with the wrong folks. And so it was just like a second chance for me to be involved in my community. So I really love my community and all the teachers and friends and family and the neighbors and neighborhood leaders that really helped me just see a different way of life.
I appreciate that so much. And a couple of things that you said about your life resonated with me too, which is like I used to be a skateboarder listening to punk rock here in DC back in the day. And
Wow.
my family was very concerned. I think they stayed concerned for probably longer than they wanted to, but here we are. It always works out if we find the right people. And so in thinking about, those turning points in your life and the way you were surrounded by a community that you were inspired by and how you wanted to get engaged, I'm curious about your first sparks of interest in the outdoors. I know for me, I played a lot outside as a little kid. I'm also the youngest. I'm the youngest of four, but there's like a full decade between myself and my siblings. And so I was kind of left to the woods to go figure out, ways to play and engage. And so for you, I'm curious about when you first started getting engaged in the outdoors. And as you're thinking about that, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your work in the open space at Montbello and how that project changed your relationship with your community and outdoor spaces.
Definitely. So when I think about the outdoors, I think in communities like ours in Montbello, means beautiful mountain. And so in Montbello, we could see the mountains from our neighborhood, and it's gorgeous. And so I think growing up, we'd see it, but we never visit. We're never able to go camping or fishing or do any of that stuff. And so the outdoors was just going to the parks, going outdoors, to go skate and riding our bikes around the neighborhood. And so I remember when I was like 13. So we're just south of the Rocky Mountain Arsenal Wildlife Refuge, which is far northeast Denver, this 15,000 plot of acres of land that is just open space and beautiful short grass prairie. And so there's just, it's closed off to the community, which is really unfortunate because I would love to be there. And so we just kind of knew it as, it's off access. We can't go in there. And so, going around the neighborhood, skateboarding, we'd find an underpass and we would go sneak underneath and go walk maybe like a mile into the arsenal. And so it wasn't as safe as I think we should have. We should have been way more cautious, but we did get caught, and a ranger came up to us and told us like, "You can't be here." And I think that really closed off the doors of like the outdoors for me in that sense. And so it's like, oh, I guess I got to stay in my neighborhood. I got to stay in my parks. Little did I know later in life and later in high school, we took field trips to the Rocky Mountain Arsenal. And so it's just like, oh, we can go in here. I just can't be over there underneath the underpass, with the deer and everything. And so it was just really interesting to kind of see that space. I'm like, wow, this is gorgeous, beautiful. You can see more of the mountains. You can see the downtown. And this is right next to my neighborhood. Like, why can't I go in here? And so learning the history of that space is just really unfortunate because, it's being closed off to our community. Now there's openings, 10, 15 years later. But the idea that people from the neighborhood just south of that area has to drive all around to a neighborhood city, which is maybe like 5 to 10 miles, where folks don't have access to cars or transportation, or just not easily accessible, when they could literally just walk there, which is really unfortunate. You got me fired up. Like I need to do something about it. Or I need to, how do we go and do that? And so another organization, Elk Environmental Learning for Kids, I think that was the first time I was super involved. I said yes to everything in my neighborhood. I was like, registered neighborhood organization, yes. Green club, yes. Guitar, like everything. And so Elk was just an outdoor organization, and they took me out on my first, fishing trip. And so, I would always be in meetings or doing activities, and I loved just being active. And Elk took me out ice fishing, not even regular fishing. And so we were on a plot, in Georgetown, and in like winter, I don't even know when, but I was like terrified. But the way that the organization works is that you have the kind of older students kind of mentoring the younger students, and I didn't even know any of the young kids, but they went out in that frozen lake, and they were just like playing. I'm like, well, I guess it's not that scary if they're not scared. So I just went out there and have a good time. And that was a big change for me too, where it's like, oh, we could go ice fishing, we go fishing. And I think that organization really opened up my horizon and show me the Arsenal and other spaces. And so how this really connects to the Montville Open Space is that organization, Elk, really want to transform and create a park in our neighborhood at this 5.5 acres right off of Peoria and Albrook Drive. And it was just this empty plot of land right next to the Albrook apartments, behind a car wash. If you're from Montbello, you know this place. And just seeing this space and just the thought of, of a new park and an open space really just resonate with us. And the connection to the Arsenal was just a perfect location for a park.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I as you were talking, I'm thinking about, and actually both of your stories connect to each other in terms of access and equity. Sometimes it's about access to a physical space, but sometimes it can be about access to a person's mindset, right? The way when people are placing, either literal walls or metaphorical walls between individuals or between communities, when somebody is regularly telling you this is not a place for you, that becomes an untruth that you carry around with you until somebody provides an opportunity for you to kind of change that narrative for yourself and for the people that you care the most about. So I really appreciate organizations like Elk who can provide those kind of opportunities for you and others. I mean, true story for me back in the day, it was the Girl Scouts, right? Like it was the Girl Scouts and being competitive and wanting to get those badges on my sash for being outside and being a good camper. But it stuck with me. Honestly, I've been camping for, I have to say, over 45 years in one capacity or another. So I really appreciate that background. Jarosneka, I want to turn back to you for just a little bit and hear some of your story too. I know that both of you have a rich history just being on this planet, and I know that this conversation is only giving us a snapshot into all the various parts of yourselves. So I really want to recognize that. But I know that you're a talented person across many, many fields of art, and so I'm curious about the artwork that you helped design and create at Panorama Park. You shared with us the access, you shared with us how you became interested in it, the process, the invitation, the visibility. But now I really want to hear about where you were when the project began. And I want to know what you did, and I want to know what you learned. You mentioned, I think it's called Pencils in the Park, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. As an entry point. So can you talk to us about your art in the park?
Yeah. So as a whole, honestly, what shifted my perception and how I wanted to do things in what I call like art equity is the pandemic. In my neighborhood, it's very sports heavy and lots of things, but we don't really have lots of art things to do here. So when the pandemic happened, I remember specifically in Colorado, they're like, you can't go anywhere, but you can go to a park. So as long as you're socially distanced. So it was just really, the program Pencils with the Park came along because it was just a way to help, specifically at that time, it was geared toward youth, continue to do something fun and find a way to get outside. So it was just really like mini art lessons, like 20 minutes, where they could just use what they have at home, whether that be a scrap sheet of paper. If they had access to a printer, it did have like downloadable worksheets. We had drop-off kits that they could pick up, or we could drop off with like colored pencils, just really ways to connect to outside, as simple as like, look out of your window, what do you see? Sit on your stoop, what do you see? Do you have a tree near you? Can you sit under the tree? Like just lots of ways to connect to the outdoors. So once I got into Panorama Park, in one of those meetings, I vividly remember they were talking something about the skate park with the youth, because the youth designed a skate park area and a youth area. And somebody was like, she's an artist, have her draw it. And I was like, okay, all right, y'all just go put me out there. It's not what I'm here for, but you know what's up. So after that, that's when Emily knew I was an artist. I don't know if that's exactly when she learned. She might have known before that when we did intros, but like that's when it really got put to the forefront. So I was first contracted to design and facilitate a workshop for the youth to do art in that skate area and youth area. So that's how I really got into the project when it came to art. After that, they saw the workshop, Emily and Joyce from Rye saw the workshop I did with the kids and how engaged they were and how much they liked it. They just saw the way I could lead a workshop. The tile art project came around, which was designed. The tile art design was by Jordan Romero, who used to work at the library, Pikes Peak Library District. And basically it was 7,200 tiles where 2-inch by 2-inch tiles were going to be decorated to make a really big mosaic. So the community had a lot of input in editing those designs, but ultimately I was brought along that project to do a lot of the community engagement work. So host those workshops, get every single one of those tiles decorated. And I just am a very overly ambitious person. I don't think there's much I can't do if I put my mind to it. So when they were like, can you do this? I was like, absolutely we can. We can go to people's houses and we can go to the library and we can go to every festival and we can go to the park and we can go to the schools. And I created an elaborate strategic plan. And I'm like, first step, I need to learn all things clay. So I went to the library and to the Manitou Art Center and learned literally from inception to completion. We did the whole project ourselves, like bought the clay, mixed the color, rolled the tiles out, cut the tiles, took them to decorate, fired them, glazed them, fired them again. Like we did every part of the project. So I really learned a lot about expanding my artistic mediums, but also how to, again, meet people where they are. We always talk about like you want to get a project done, but some people aren't humble enough to take themselves to the places where people are. So like we went to the senior center, we went to the elementary schools, we went to every festival that summer, like exhausted, made 1,000 tiles a day, sometimes 40 tiles in a day, sometimes 20 tiles in a day. But we realized that to reach community, you really have to be intentional about being accessible. I can't tell people, you can only come to the library from this time to this time. And if you don't make it, oh, well, like we really have to put ourselves in places where we can be reached. So that's really how I was a part of that project and expanded my community engagement portfolio and repertoire. And then shortly after that, there was the fellowship. And then everyone was like, you should apply. And then I applied and I'm here. So my work with TPL kind of started as a contractor before the fellowship, through these art avenues.
I love that. I love that so much. And, both of you are quite multifaceted individuals. And I want to stick with you a little bit longer, Jarosneka, because, we've got, for me, I'm seeing this kind of arc of your relationship with Panorama. And it's the town hall meeting, for lack of a better term, right? Where you show up and then you show up again and you're saying, okay, this is starting to feel good. And then you see an opportunity to bring your talents and your skills around your artistry. Like, okay, this is starting to feel good. But there's also another element there, and that is about government, local government in particular. And, none of this work happens in isolation, right? It's always, quite collaborative. There's always various sectors that are going to be involved, particularly when we're talking about building and transforming parks and communities. And when we were having a conversation before, you had mentioned that prior to being deeply involved with the Trust for Public Land, you had a reasonable mistrust with government. And thinking about the partnerships that exist between governments, like city governments and the community, I'm curious about how you feel about local government now as a result of your work with the park and the way you've been able to be engaged or maybe disengaged. I don't know, maybe I'm making some assumptions here with your local government. How has that changed at all? And how can local government show up more readily with communities' desires most at the center?
Yeah, I think it's first important to say that, like, yes, Colorado is a blue state, or what we call purplish state, but Colorado Springs, where I live, is millions percent red. We are very red. And that dictates a lot of the things that we do. Prior to my TPL experience, I was like a community activist, advocate, whatever word we want to use. And a lot of that was partly directly dealing with like city council, going to these meetings, trying to advocate and just being told like, no, we don't care. Not specifically, we don't care about your community, but I can recall one meeting where I'm a very articulate person. I can research, I can do that. So I did my research and I come to city council and I'm like, we're your constituents, this is this and this, and we should be doing this and this and this. Especially because you have so much control. We have a strong mayor here, but city council dictates a lot, our budget, so many different things. And they're like, a person like you will never understand or never be in this seat to make any impactful change. And I was like, bet, okay, all right, cool. And I'm a person that like, and like, if you tell me no, it's a hell yes. Like I'm gonna figure it out. Like I'm gonna do everything, raise hell, high water. So after that, that's when I really jumped into like, what can I do to meet people, my community where they are and empower them in any way to just be a vehicle of change and speak their truth and all that good stuff. So in the very beginning, the relationship was of mistrust, not only because of the stigmas I have in my community, but my direct relationship experience, right? Fast forward to TPL, some of these people that we had these conversations with have a whole new attitude. And I'm like, I remember what happened. So it was a lot of, and I had so many conversations with Emily. There were times where like I organized stakeholder meetings, which is basically bringing the Panorama Park before the renovation was known for like a lot of violence, a lot of police calls. So I knew that we had to address this before we reopened the park, because we don't want the same stigma of, oh, there's a kid in a hoodie in the park playing, call the police on him. Like, that's not cool. So we need to figure this out before the park reopened. So even leading those meetings, I was so uncomfortable at some points, like, oh my gosh, I have to call this person. I have to deal with this person. I already know based on my experience with them, how they feel. So there was just a lot of personal work I had to do to like overcome those things that I knew was important, not only for the greater good, but for myself. And on the other side of things, I learned that it's a lot about compromise and just maybe sometimes small misunderstandings, but inherently like some things haven't changed, even though a lot of things have, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I'm much more comfortable and confident, in part a lot due to my fellowship and just forcing myself outside of my comfort zone to build these relationships with some people that we know are to not be advocates for people that look like me, my community, etc. So the relationships for me have changed in a positive way. And I would say overall for like Rise and especially the community members that were involved in this process for Panorama Park, because we got to experience city officials, again, Parks and Rec, CSPD, Colorado Springs Police Department, and whoever in just a different way, to where because we had a partner like a strong partner like TPL, it was almost like we inherently had a little bit more respect because we had an organization that was respected at the table with us, if that makes sense. Okay. So things are changing in a good way, and they have evolved, but there's still things we need to work on.
I get that. Yes. I think essentially I'm hearing that parks and projects are transformative for the people and the places. When you have the right people brought together to do this. This is a good conversation. I think a lot of people need to hear this. I'm going to pivot a little bit, and you just started to touch on it actually, but I'm going to give you a chance to drink some water. If you need some, take a breath and hand it back over to Chris, because I'm interested in talking about intersectionality. And, this is actually a concept, a reality language that was introduced to us by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw years ago. And a lot of people use it in various ways. But I think what I've been observing of late, a lot of the generations that came after me are more familiar with intersectionality in terms of our identities. But I think that there are some folks in the generations that came before all of us, it's not necessarily something that they wrap their heads around. And so I'm curious, Chris, thinking about the story that you shared about teenage Chris and potentially the way folks were, receiving you or had a perception of you. How do you relate to this idea of intersectionality?
Yeah. So the idea behind it really is, I am of many things. We all are of many backgrounds and many sections of our lives and our age and our cultures. Growing up in Montbello, even, saying growing up in the United States, I am a brown male. And so people would assume that I'm Latino, but they would also, see he's Mexican and I'm not Mexican. My family's from Central America, El Salvador, and so I'm Salvadorian. And so I think that's already like I started when I was like 5 years old. I was like, no, I'm not Mexican, I'm Salvadorian. And so, that's one part of, my identity. And so it's just tough in between where I think I've had this identity crisis where, I'm not Salvadorian enough to be Salvadorian, or I'm not American enough. I'm too brown, or I'm too white, or, the way that I act. And so I think, when you're placed in that box, you limit people's, abilities and their potential. And so I think I was placed in that box. And so it wasn't until people really started asking me, it's like, what do you want to do? Who are you, Chris? Till I really thought, like, I love metal. I still love metal to this day. So I'm a fellow metalhead, and so it's fun to, relate to people on that. It's like, oh, that's cool. And my, I've always kind of been on the outskirts of all my identities and personalities. And so, I love your intro too, Rhonda, where it's like, I want to say that too. I'm Chris Urias. I'm son of Vladimir and son of Juana Mejia. I'm a cat dad. I'm a plant dad as well. I love plants. And so we have so many kind of identities. And so it's just really understanding that we're more complex than just one aspect of our lives, whether it's, outdoors, or whether it's, animals or music or culture. And so, that could tell us more of a story about who we are as, each other, and how will we come together, whether it's a park project or a park opening, we could all come together. It doesn't matter, what your background is, how you look like, or, like, oh, I've never been fishing, or I've never been outdoors, or I don't know what that park looks different, So I think it's just being able to understand. And I love just like showing people my other sides. It's like, oh, I also do this, and I love tech, and I love this, and I love finances. And it's just, there's so many aspects, I love everything. And so I love to learn. I think that's at the end of it. I just love to learn. Yeah. I love to be with people.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that so much. And I know, turning over to you, Jarosneka, you also had an interesting upbringing. I know that you've lived in a few different places and you identify a few different ways. And so I would love for you to share a bit about your upbringing and what you've learned and how it informs the work that you're doing in this world.
Yeah, I resonate with what Chris said a lot. I am all the things, multiple things, and have lived on the edge of a lot of different things. So I am a Black woman. That's first and foremost. Race, the social construct of race is what it is. So aside from that, both my parents are from Panama. So I'm Latina. I'm a first generation Latina. So they're, directly from Panama. I was born in Brooklyn, and I have lived a few places. So, living in Brooklyn, where everybody looks like me, everybody speaks multiple languages, whether that be Black people speaking Spanish, French, Patois, which is his own language. We'll talk about that later. Multiple different things, like that's the norm. But in Colorado, moving here, it's like, it's crazy that Chris said that he's always been called a Mexican. I've been always called a Black Mexican here, because people here just literally think, for multiple reasons, right? Colorado was Mexican territory. So shout out to all the Mexicans. That's absolutely valid. But there are so many other identities that are not Mexican, that are Latin American or Spaniard or whatever, that speak Spanish. So just being a kid that has a name like Jarosneka, everybody's like, what are you? Where are you from? This. And I'm like, I'm American technically, because I was born in America, And they're like, well, you're whitewashed. You speak like a white girl, or like this or like that. Like, you're not Latina enough because you don't look like Jennifer Lopez. But then, like, you're not Black enough because you didn't grow up eating soul food. And I didn't try collard greens and grits until I was like 17, because I went to my friend's house, but we didn't grow up eating that. So, I mean, there's no, it's like you can't win for losing almost. But at the same time, I think it has given me such a unique perspective of being so cultured and understanding that, like, we are all multifaceted in our identities and in our history, that it almost, I want to say, gives me an advantage of just being more open-minded, to accepting lots of different people. I think I work so well within my community because there's a huge Latin community, so I can speak Spanish and relate in that way. There's a huge, Black and brown and Asian. I just think I'm a chameleon. I'm so versatile because of the multicultural experience I had growing up. So intersectionality I think it's important to also realize that even Black Americans are intersectional. White people are like everybody has intersections. It's just your perspective is your reality. And I just choose to acknowledge my intersections a little bit more than other people maybe.
You're here to all of that. And, sometimes I think about, gosh, if folks could just embrace their own intersectionality, they would be able to see it as a form of liberation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as long as folks feel threatened and unable to bring their full selves into spaces and places, be it, the community or work, we're going to continue to have this struggle, to create a sense and a reality around belonging. It's hard to belong when people don't want to receive you in your entirety. So I really appreciate you all sharing this because it resonates with me and how I feel like I've been growing up. I still consider myself in the process.
Yeah.
Regardless of the years on the calendar, I am very much still growing up. Well, thank you. I'm going to transition us into the fact that you all are big ideas. As you know, the podcast is called People, Nature, and Big Ideas. And when my producer, Tom, and I first talked to you two several weeks ago, I think he asked you about what sort of big ideas you thought we should talk about. And one of you said, and I can't remember which one of you it was, we are the big ideas. Chris, I think it might have been you, if my memory serves me well. And I know you didn't mean it in any egotistical sense, but you were right. And Tom put it at the top of the notes right after our call, we are the big ideas. And I just think it's really true, as we've been talking about how the two of you came into these spaces, as we've been talking about the transformation of your lives over time, as we've talked about just now, the intersectionality. So I'm going to put you all on the spot for a minute, and we're just going to kind of ruminate around this idea for just a minute. And I'd love to hear you both advocate for the truth that you are a big idea. So I'm going to ask you both to answer the question, why are you the big idea?
I can start.
Chris.
Yeah, I could start. Really, I think through my time at TPL and kind of a lot of spaces that I've been in, the secret sauce was kind of there. I feel like folks were kind of getting there. They were just asking for youth, input. Let's listen to youth and the community. And so when I kind of got that, when I was asked, I think somewhere in middle school, that I remember my principal, she's like, "You're a good kid, Chris. Your sister's amazing, but you're good too." She's like, "What is it that makes you act like this?" Or I don't know. It was just this kind of interesting conversation that was just out of the norm. And it was just really just go ahead and ask me, And so then it just was a platform that I was able to go out there. And so that's really the secret sauce, is just ask, And so, as a youth, and then, considering myself a youth leader later, it's like, the answers are there. You just got to ask. And so, people are asking me as a community member now, and I'm 27, it's like, what do you think, Chris? I was like, well, I can't speak on behalf of the whole community, but let's ask. Let's go to the community. Let's ask the youth. Let's ask the seniors. Let's ask everyone. And so the big idea is just really, I feel like the answer is there. We just gotta find it, and we gotta have the platform and the space to put people there to kind of share them, because and I think that's what people are afraid of, is takes time. And I think that's what's, and we don't have a lot of time, I feel like, in these structures of that we operate in, is that we got to do it now. We need an answer now. And I think that just doesn't allow that space for us to be there. And so I've just been very fortunate where I've been in those spaces where it's like, well, we have some time, we carve some time. What do you think? And let's work through it. Let's, ask my family, ask my friends. How can I ask my friends? So when I went to my friends, that was an eye opener too. In middle school, it's like my principal asked me, bring your friends, to have a conversation about school and culture and identity. And then one of the first things is like, "Hey, Chris, did you notice that all your friends are males?" And I was like, "Whoa, no, I didn't know." And so just just getting out of this kind of default zone and trying to think, through things. It's maybe it's not your first answer, but maybe we kind of work through it and it's maybe your second answer, your third answer, and getting people to think outside the box, because sometimes we're restricted.
I love that default zone. I'm going to be sitting with that a lot. Thank you. Thank you for that. Jarasnika, why are you a big idea?
I completely agree with Chris. I think that people, as like you said in the beginning, especially with conservation, it's a white male dominated field, and the foundations that this world, especially the United States, were built upon are just of a certain way, and it's inevitable that things and times are changing. And I think I am the big idea. Chris is the big idea. We are the big idea, because it's really just investing in people, right? As our core fellowship, yes, it's a 2-year fellowship, but this has given us both a platform where we can learn, grow, and evolve and pay us for our expertise. We've been given a position of trust. I'll speak for Chris too. We're not micromanaged. We're not questioned. Like, when we're asked to do something, we deliver because we're trusted, because people have invested in us, because aside from accolades and certificates and degrees, which I do not have, my lived experience is just as valuable as, a bachelor's or master's, whatever we want to equivocate that to. And land and parks and open spaces and trails, those places are important, but without the people, they're nothing. So I think the big idea is just to continue to pivot and think outside of the box and be non-traditional as much as you can, because that's the world we're in now. Like, things are changing so fast with technology and the youth and TikTok and entrepreneurship. And if we don't get on this out of the box thinking, you're going to be left behind. Like, there's no other option. So especially for like TPL in the world, if we're not leaning into those things that maybe make us a little bit uncomfortable, it was a huge risk to have, these inaugural fellows of people in their neighborhoods that are just doing the work and love their community. Like, what makes them, aside from, of course, we turned out to really be amazing, successful people, but aside from that, before y'all knew that, what makes them special? Why should we pay them X amount a year? Why should we trust them to push these projects and to build these relationships? It's like Chris said, the answers are there, and we are living proof that it works. When you invest in people and you trust them to do what they say they're going to do and what they know how to do, it works. So
yes.
Yeah.
Yes to all of that. Thank you both so much. And we have just a few minutes left, and I want to, this is a perfect segue into talking about what it might mean to reimagine conservation, reimagine the movement, reimagine a path forward, kind of maybe disentangling ourselves from kind of the origin story many, many, many decades and decades ago. And I think part of it comes down to bringing more folks of color into these conversations, and not in a box checking way, not in a way that is tokenizing, but because this is the reality of our nation. When I go outside in my neighborhood here in Washington, D.C., I'm in Southeast Washington, D.C., I see folks who look like me. So when I go to the park, I live really close to a trail, I want to see the same people in my neighborhood on that trail. And so I think as organizations and leaders look to bring more folks of color to the table, again, in the right way, with the right intentions, the right purpose, and the right heart and relationships, they also need to realize the barriers that are there. And sometimes they are barriers that an entity could be perpetuating on their own, knowingly or unknowingly. And so whether it's social connections, whether it's the degrees that you're talking about, whether it's the job experiences, the neighborhood they live in, I mean, there's so many ways that people of color will fly under the radar. And they really do want to show up, but there are a lot of reasons that they can't, or there are a lot of reasons that they aren't seen. And I think that collectively, we need to reevaluate how we think about bringing people in. So I really appreciate you lifting up that it is your skills, talent, heart, expertise, your lived experiences that got you into the Trust for Public Land. And so when we think about that, for me, and talking about equity, that is part of the direction moving forward. it's the opportunity to reevaluate. So when we think about creating more space for people with all kinds of backgrounds, what do you think we need to prioritize or focus on first? Take a minute. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. So in my story, where I had an organization that was a champion for me to kind of explore, I think that's where Jared Snake and I kind of like differ, where it's Jared Snake can talk a little bit about that, where her experience in the outdoors is completely different from mine. And what is the outdoors? Like, how do we define the outdoors? What is the wild or nature? These words are stewardship. And so the core program, community outreach with resident experts, is just an amazing, all-encompassing, wholesome kind of program that I think really did a really good job in listening to the community. The 3 pillars is support community organizations, support youth leadership, and support rising leaders. And so, Jared Snake and I are in this position right now, but there's tons of Chris and Jared Snake out there. There's tons of people in every single community that are champions and ready to do the work, or maybe don't have that college degree. I don't have the college degree myself either, that don't have the experience, and I'll let Jared Snake talk about kind of her background, like what does the outdoors means to her. And so, can I ask you really quick, just to kind of say that real quick of what, that kind of sound?
Yeah. So elk, or Chris briefly talked about elk, like from a youth, he got to do ice fishing and all these cool things. Like multiple things can exist at once, right? So in Colorado, when people say, do you enjoy the outdoors? We think great outdoors, Colorado, which is the mountains, which is skiing, which is the outdoors. To us does not mean literally step outside of your door, you're on your stoop, you're on the asphalt jump roping, you're playing basketball. Like that's not, if somebody were to ask me, do you enjoy the outdoors? I would say no, because I'm thinking of the great outdoors. I don't know if that's specific to Colorado. I don't know about everybody else, but that's how it is here. So growing up in Brooklyn, again, played in the fire hydrant, double Dutch hopscotch on the street, moved here, playing basketball, cookouts, again, densely diverse populated neighborhood. We played like tetherball, a little volleyball, some other sports, not pickleball for the record yet again. But my experience to the outdoors is literally just going outside. So when I think just the language, like Chris was talking about, not only the language, but the understanding is something that we still have work to do. And then the comfort level, right? If I go to a park in my neighborhood or not, and I literally don't see one person that looks like me, I'm going to be uncomfortable. Like that's just the truth of, my personal history, the history of the United States, like especially in Colorado. I think there's multiple things that we need to break down, but I'm gonna let Chris finish. But that's my background of the outdoors. So yeah, I don't have any of that technical outdoor experience.
And I ask her really because I love bouncing off Jess Snake, and she's amazing. She gives me ideas and the thoughts keeps going. And so there's many versions of trying to get outdoors. My mother even just asked, just started camping, and it wasn't my influence. It wasn't my, history with elk or even just going outside with my friends and family. But, I think this conversation was really interesting of like, so what do you do again? and then trying to explain to her what I do. And then really the question that she gave back to me was, why is that important? Or why do you do that? Why do you protect lands, trails and parks and creating lands? And I was like, well, you just started getting into camping, it has to start from somewhere, it has to be public, and so if not, then it'd just be a private spot and you can't go to these places and recreate and fish and camp. And so she was kind of getting the gears going, and she didn't really understand, like, oh, that's a career, like you could do that as a career. And so I think, there's tons of folks that don't know. And so I think it's just the experience and the level of knowledge and kind of influence. Now I'm starting to see some of my friends, later on in life that weren't part of elk or anything, they're starting to hike, they're starting to go outdoors and they're enjoying it. And they love it. They're like, yeah, Colorado is amazing. And, you could spend a whole lifetime just exploring Colorado, just in the trails and the mountains and everywhere. And I think there's just so many, like, what do we prioritize? That's a hard question. Like I'm like going all over the place because I'm like,
it was an unfair question, maybe.
I mean, in my situation, how do you prioritize? Invest in, when you're young, to take them out to the mountains and camping, or to the arsenal that's 10 minutes away, or, a fellow park. How do we ingrain this idea of backyard to backcountry? Outdoor spaces can also be your front porch and your backyard and exploring. but also, that's how they got me. But how do we get Jarosneka where later in life the outdoors is also barbecuing and going to the park and playing volleyball, hanging out, but it's not this whole bigger idea that it's has to be camping and skiing and all these rigorous activities, but it also can be.
And those are sometimes there are some, costs that are associated with those activities that make them, again, inaccessible, right? And so, Jarosneka, did you have a closing thought that you wanted to share to that question?
Yeah, I think all of those things are absolutely true. If I had to pinpoint a couple things, though, I think the first would be time invested, especially with like Panorama Park and how we got to this beautiful community-led project. Was like, Emily's been here, I think she said since 2016 is when they first identified Southeast, and Panorama Park just opened in 2022, so I know it's a heavy lift and heavy burden and a lot of capacity building, but as a whole for conservation, like taking the time to really understand and get to know communities and understand the differences and the nuances, and knowing that like the way that one community recreates, and we say these things, but are we doing these things is my point. Like, are we actually, we know that some people recreate differently, but are you taking the time to really go and talk to people and build trust and learn? And then the youth component is huge too. Like with the youth programs we have now, we're intentionally taking them paddleboarding, taking them ice skating, taking them to places that we know they have no access to without, the resources of it being free, or like the transportation. And then lastly, I would say just continuing to invest in people and understanding that like we were not the first ones here. We have to honor the land and try to bring people back into their way that they feel comfortable being natural in the outdoors, and also holding people accountable, right? So if you're still not seeing people in those parks or hiking, it's for a reason. Do you have people on those trails that are like, go home, you don't belong here? Do you have somebody that is calling the police on little kids with hoodies? Do you have we have to be able to hold each other accountable, from the CEO to the field workers to the volunteers to the community members, because it's never going to change if we are just changing policy and checking boxes, but the inherent culture of like racism, white supremacy, all these things are still at play. So those would be the main takeaways I have.
Well, I hope my job's not on the line with you two taking it. No, I mean, this is what equity is. This is what leadership looks like. And I just want to honor both of you for giving me some of your time to share. I know that a lot of folks are always interested in talking with you. And I think that that's because you have a lot to offer. There is a lot to learn. The idea of reimagining the conservation movement is really exciting. And I don't know that we'll get there if we don't have folks like you leading the way with us. So being in solidarity with one another is something that I hope we can continue. And so with that, I just want to say thank you on behalf of myself as the host of this show, but also on behalf of the Trust for Public Land, and also on behalf of your community, and also on behalf of the nation at large, because this is where change begins. It's one street at a time, it's one park at a time, and I honor you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
This
you.
has been amazing. Thank you.